Hi, so I thought I'd make another little video about the twin flame journey. And it's just going to be a sort of collection of thoughts of the journey, my observations, some thoughts, some feelings about it. I'm not some kind of expert about twin flame stuff, and I'm not a psychologist. So these are just my thoughts and ideas. It's such a bizarre and strange journey. And it's got so many elements to it. And I'll talk a little bit about avoidance and also people with anxiety attachment disorders as well, because I feel like they can be sort of swept up as a cohort in this twin flame journey as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the twin flame journey could be, my own sort of thoughts on what it could be, on various things that it could mean. And I'll talk a little bit about people with avoidant personality disorder, a little bit about people with anxiety as well, because it seems that one party can often be anxious, one party can often be avoidant. So there's that too. And then I'll talk a lot about spirituality, probably, because I see it as very much a sacred dance. And it's very much entwined with spirituality. And I see it also as, it's kind of like the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. It's kind of like the individuation process that Jung talked about, Carl Jung. Individuation to Carl Jung is something very much that happens in your later years, in your second half of life. It's when life becomes a bit more transpersonal, a bit less about you and what you can take from life and more about what you can give back. And the journey that happens is very much a journey back to authenticity, who you are really. I think you can spend the first half of your life sort of building up masks or personas, as Jung called them. And we can get a bit embedded in that, a bit entrenched in that. And then individuation is kind of like stripping all of that back and coming back to a raw core part of yourself. And I feel like the twin flame journey really embodies that as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So the twin flame journey then, what it is not, it isn't about hiding in the ego. It isn't about that. And this is where avoidant personalities can trip up a bit when they're hit with the twin flame journey. Because the twin flame journey, there's nowhere left to hide from yourself. Ultimately, it's revealing you back to you. And it does this through your mirror self, the twin flame, your divine counterpart, serves as your mirror. And I also think it's as well not to get too caught up in the label of twin flame, because it carries such heavy connotations. But suffice it to say, if there's a person that you've been in some sort of dance with for some time, maybe known for some years, maybe you've got quite an extraordinary bond with this person and it's gone into the realm of the spiritual. And maybe you've got a telepathic connection with this person at times. Maybe there's astral travel involved, who knows? Maybe you feel like it's divinely ordained and divinely directed at times as well. Then you're almost certainly on some kind of journey with a high-level soulmate. It could be a twin flame. Now, some people talk about a false twin flame as well and say that some of the experiences can mirror that of a twin flame journey in a false twin flame union. And that I don't know about. But it's as well perhaps to get not too caught up in the label, but more in what this is teaching you. Because I see it as like about what it's teaching us as much as anything else, you know? About what it can teach you. I think in Western society, we can get so caught up in the goal, in an end goal, and the journey can often be just as important, if not more so. The idea of the end goal perhaps is reunion with your twin flame, but it's the journey of who you become to get to that point of reunion that's extraordinary. And then when you actually reunite, well, then that's the beginning of a whole new journey, and so on, you know? But I really do look at the twin flame journey as a spiritual dance, because very often in life we think we know what we're doing, and we get very caught up in the mundane world, in material things. And we get into a routine, and there's safety in a routine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's how we construct a safe, ordered world for ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But sometimes that safety can become a prison. Sometimes that safety can become a bit stultifying. And we don't really notice. We just carry on with our routine. And sometimes we require novelty. Sometimes the soul needs something new, you know? It's why creativity is so much fun, because it's so enlivening for the spirit. And in this day and age, when there's so much AI everything, I think people are hungering more and more for that which is real and authentic, recognizing that we can't make a god from AI, you know? AI it doesn't have a conscience, it doesn't have a soul, and it doesn't have a heart. And yet here we are, turning it into something to worship, something to rule over us, something elevated above us. It's got its uses, but we are a miracle. We're a walking miracle. You know, where humans are literally the divine in human form. We've temporarily forgotten our divine origins as we walk around in these human meat suits for a time. And then we do it all again, incarnation by incarnation. And we have experiences every now and again which shake us out of the mundane and bring us into the world of the numinous, the world of the extraordinary, the fantastical, the magical, you know? And I feel like in this day and age, I feel like it's almost like life is speeding up, and we're hearing more and more about stories of the miraculous, the numinous and the divine. And that's a beautiful thing, because it's reminding us more and more of the spirituality, the innate spirituality within each and every one of us. No one here on this planet is more elevated than anyone else. We're just in different states of remembering or forgetting. And that's it, you know? And the twin flame journey, then, I see it as something to come along and shake us awake very vigorously from our slumber and go, hi, are you awake yet? Have you paid attention? Have you noticed that you're a divine being in human form? And the twin flame journey helps do this. And one of the ways it helps do this is by the dark night of the soul, which is quickly followed by a spiritual awakening. Some people don't necessarily have those in that order, but when you have these experiences, as you're undergoing your kind of ego death and rebirth, you know, it's a tremendous thing. And you start to realize that your spiritual journey, it's kind of happening for you and with you and through you. And it isn't necessarily just all about you anymore either. It does become more transpersonal. Back to Jung and the notion of individuation. It becomes about who you are and who you can be in the world, how effective you can be in the world. The more you learn about spirituality, the more you can shine your own light, because the more you become aware of the infinite love that exists within you. If only you can just shut off the chatter in that left hemisphere of your brain just long enough. Just long enough. A little bit of meditation, a little bit of mindfulness is all it takes sometimes to let in that crack of awareness, you know? And so there's the transpersonal nature of your journey, which is what you're gifting back to the world, what you can offer back to the world, but also this dance with the other, this dance with your twin, sometimes your seeming opposite, this sacred dance that reminds you that you're not alone. You're in this together with this other person as well, whether apart or together. It acts as a catalyst, a very, very powerful catalyst of change. And it's an invitation. It's an invitation to go a bit deeper into your life, into who you are, what you're doing here. Are you happy in your life? It's almost like if meditation and counselling are like hitting the pause button on your life, you just hit a pause button and you take a little look where you are. Are you happy? Are you on the right track? Have you just been going through the motions in your life for a time? Do you need a bit of a course correction and so on? And the twin flame journey is similar, but it's kind of like that on steroids. It's like an absolute flashlight into every dark nook and cranny of your world. The shadow side, the parts of you that you keep hidden even from yourself. The twin flame journey illuminates all of it and then reflects it back at you and says, are you happy? Are you where you want to be? Are you doing what you want to do? And if you get this absolute feeling of delight and joy and love dance into your heart upon this connection, this twin flame connection that you don't have in your normal day-to-day, then there's probably something there to look at. Now, not every twin flame might necessarily be a sort of romantic experience, although I think the vast majority generally is. But it's said that it isn't always about that. Some people would say their twin flame can be a platonic connection. Some people would say that the twin flame journey is simply a catalyst for change and doesn't necessarily need to come into union. I'd imagine that's not necessarily a hard and fast rule of one size fits all. It's who you are and where you are on your individual journey, but it's kind of like something you've co-created with the divine to wake you at a particular moment of your life, to take your life to the next level. And it could do this a few times, potentially at different points in your lives, both of you, before you perhaps come into final union. It can serve as a catalyst. Maybe you need to move to a new place or study a new thing. Maybe you need to let go of a relationship. As I say, sometimes we become a bit entrenched in routine and we think that that's fine. You know, we think that that's all that we should be doing. We think that safety is everything. And then life comes along and life says, no, it was never supposed to simply be about existing day to day, just getting by, feeling a bit dead inside. That isn't living. That's just not being dead yet, you know. Sometimes you need to stir that flame within your heart. Sometimes you need to take that leap of faith. Sometimes you need to take a risk that others think mad. The only voice that ultimately matters is your own. Providing you're not doing something completely insane, perhaps, and then maybe you might need to listen to other people as well. But ultimately, coming into a place of trusting yourself, knowing yourself and loving yourself. And these are all parts of the journey too. So the twin flame journey then, I guess, is perhaps multifaceted. It's about healing your inner child wounds as well. And this is where the avoidant and the anxious attachment styles come into play. There's a lot of tarot reads out there at the moment about the twin flame journey, and there's this cohort of people where a lot of people seem to be avoidant. The divine masculine, in some cases, seems to be a bit avoidant, and it can seem that the emphasis of these videos is to take a look at that, where the divine feminine gets to feel like she gets off the hook. You know, oh, look, he's avoidant, he's not doing the work, therefore she's fine, etc. And I'm thinking, no, that isn't how this should be. You know, we don't get to simply point the finger of blame at the divine counterpart and not look at ourselves as well. All of us are flawed. There is not one single human out there that doesn't have their flaws, their problems, their inconsistencies, childhood wounds, etc. It's just the varying degrees of those things. And if your divine counterpart is an avoidant, there could be a chance in some cases that you might be anxious, have had an anxious attachment style, or maybe that you still do. And if that could be the case, there's going to be things there for you to look at in yourself as well. And when we're looking at ourselves in this way, we have to do so with great love, great compassion and care. You know, there can be a thing with avoidance as well, where I think they can beat themselves up for far too long over what they did or didn't do, or what they perceived they didn't do when they were younger through avoidance, etc. But there comes a point where you absolutely must forgive yourself and hold compassion for who you were, regardless of what you think you've done, because all of us just really tend to do the best we could at the time. The benefit of hindsight is to look back with 20/20 vision, but you almost certainly never have 20/20 vision when you live through a problem. But that's part of the challenge. If it were easy, it wouldn't be a challenge. We learn and we grow, you know. There's something in spirituality called the spiral path, and the spiral path is kind of the concept that we meet the same problem sometimes, many times in our lives. We can meet the same problem, again in a different guise maybe. But the idea is that we've leveled up when we meet it again. And so we understand how we responded to this problem before. We go, well, we've been down that road. We know where that leads. It doesn't lead anywhere good. So you can change your response, and then the situation around it will change. And that's attaining a level of mastery over your life. You'll then have new problems to deal with. We all do. There's never a point we stop learning. But there's just that point where your self-awareness grows to a degree that you don't have to repeat the same patterns endlessly. But a level of self-awareness has to come into play for that. And that's where meditation can be really great as well, because meditation floods your consciousness with self-awareness. Avoidant people tend not to be that self-aware. They tend not to be that aware of unconscious processes and patterning. Anxious people too will find that they repeat various patterns of behaviour, how they respond to problems with a fear-based response, for example. Both avoidance and anxious attachment styles are formed in childhood. The avoidant will invariably, it's said, be in a home where love can't be expressed. So if they try and express love as a child and it isn't met with love in response, what can happen is they have a core wound of shame, believing themselves to be unlovable, and they take that into adulthood, maybe unconsciously. But they keep love at a distance. Love is something that they feel very unsure about, a bit scared of, a bit sceptical of, perhaps. Sometimes they can develop a very heavy reliance upon logic, reason, all of that as a response, and be very disconnected from their heart centre, very cynical and disconnected from their heart, and maybe quite judgmental about other people. And being judgmental can act as a distancing device in this way, because when they're judgmental of others, it serves to keep people away from them. They don't have to trust them. They don't have to get emotionally close to them, because why would they? They don't trust them, and so on, you know? And anxious people can grow up in homes that show a lot of love, but maybe there was a lot of chaos and uncertainty And maybe caregivers weren't always very stable, and so they grow up feeling quite anxious. Both parties will find that they seek validation outside of themselves through various means. So maybe they might flirt quite a lot. Maybe they will find it a little bit difficult to form attachments, or the avoidant will. Both the avoidant and the anxiously attached person will probably be really bad people pleasers or good people pleasers, but it's, it's not great to be a people pleaser. It's kind of a codependency. It's a way of seeking validation, perhaps, as well. And also, if you excessively people please, you tend not to be pleasing yourself. You can become a bit disconnected from your own needs, your own wants, your own desires, what lights you up, and so on. So there's a similarity between the two of them, and at best they could work in a complementary manner, but at worst they could just trigger each other. So if you're in a twin flame journey, if you believe you are, and you believe that one of you is avoidant, and you may or may not be a little bit anxious, it's as well to look at yourself as well. It's great to have some understanding of what your person is like, from a psychological perspective. It's absolutely golden to have some sort of idea. But you also need to be aware that you too will have issues. And what are they? Because it's very easy, I think, sometimes to point a finger of blame, or if we're looking a lot at what perceived flaws might be in a partner or in an intended partner, etc. It's very easy, perhaps, to then just skip on that process within ourselves. But we can't fix them. We can only fix ourselves. And whatever flaws you think you're seeing in them, chances are you've got some flaws in you too. You've got some unhealed childhood wounds. You've got some issues which you haven't looked at. You can't lay the blame entirely at their feet as to why you're not in union yet with your twin flame, Sure, it could be, if they're avoidant, there's going to be issues, absolutely, with how they respond to emotion, with how they push people away, keep people at arm's length, maybe self-sabotage a little bit, all sorts of things, don't get me wrong. But if you're going to do the process that the twin flame journey requires, I believe that means you have to go within as well. It doesn't mean exonerating bad behaviour. If someone is just not going to open up and give an inch of themselves, if they're hot and cold and inconsistent, if they're not telling you how they feel, if they're not coming forward in any way, and they're giving you absolutely nothing on the 3D to hold on to, then you must let that go. Absolutely no question. Whether you think they're your twin flame or not, I think the idea of twin flame, again, it comes back to romanticising a title, romanticising an idea. Don't hang on, don't cling on perhaps too much to the idea of a twin flame. Don't become too attached to a title of a thing, because that could cloud your judgment in that regard. And it's a hard enough journey. If you are on a twin flame journey, it can be devastating at times. But ultimately, this is also why excellent self-care and excellent boundaries come into play. You have to practice those. If you think that your person is avoidant, then you have to protect yourself ultimately against this person. And what I mean by that is simply practicing excellent self-care. If you think they're taking too much and giving too little of themselves, of their heart, you have to put boundaries up, because literally now these boundaries will serve as a mechanism to protect you, and you need that in a very strong love connection if the other person isn't coming forward in a healthy, more healed way, It's a huge connection. And so if somebody is coming forward and they're being a bit toxic, or they're not really sure what they're doing, maybe it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, a little bit of a dance around, maybe you've been waiting for years, then you have to make that decision at some point to get off the merry-go-round, to stop playing the game, to just go back to yourself, draw your energy back to yourself, heal, nurture, love yourself, heal those inner child wounds that tell you you're not good enough if you need to. You know, if you've been telling yourself this story, if you've got feelings of deep vulnerability, feelings that you're not good enough, feelings of lack of self-worth, anything like that, you've got to work on healing that. Knowing your worth is key. Healing those inner child wounds, sending love to your partner at a distance and then closing that door and coming back to yourself is key in that moment. You know, you can't let the romanticism of an idea carry you away. And I think with the twin flame journey as well, there's a sense that both parties will give a lot of leeway to the other person because of this connection, the extraordinary sense of this connection. Because even if it's a bit dysfunctional, even if your person isn't showing up in the 3D world how you'd like them to, in the 5D world, it could be a different story. It could be that you've got a bit of that telepathic connection. It could be that you're dreaming of them quite often, or that you've got a feeling just before they contact you and things like this. It could be that things like that are going on, but they're wildly different on the 3D. And you've got to kind of go on what's happening on the 3D and ultimately make sure you protect yourself. So you can do that with great love, but you must practice good boundaries. Otherwise you could end up getting unwell, etc., because you're leaking so much energy to a connection that isn't nourishing you in return. You can't give to something that isn't giving anything back to you. That's just going to deplete your energy, you know? So you have to just bear that in mind as well, because it's such a powerful connection. But as I say, it isn't all one-sided. It isn't all about them doing the work and you're not doing any work. I believe it's a connection that invites you to dive deeply into yourself, into your own psyche, to try and figure out a bit more about who you are, forgive yourself and heal yourself. And all of that is important for the spiritual journey as well. Knowing who you are is part of the spiritual journey. Healing yourself is part of the spiritual journey. We have to heal ourselves again and again and again in this life. This life takes so much from us. It will steal your vitality if you let it. You can't let it. You have to fight sometimes just to keep your head above water, just to maintain your own light. And sometimes your light will go out. Sometimes you'll just feel exhausted by it all and maybe a bit bitter and brittle and broken and lost. And all of that is okay, because all of that is part of the journey too. But then you fight. Then you come back to who you are. Then you seek that spiritual solace. Then you seek that healing. Then you drink deeply of a healing well and you replenish yourself and you slowly, slowly come back to the light. Come back to that love and light that was within you all along, but that you might have just forgotten a while in this strange journey, this strange dance with the spiritual. You know, and that could be part of the spiral path as well, of course. You know, we see an awful lot of people who are new age spiritual folk talk a lot about light and love all the time. There was a phase a few years ago where they'd all just be light and love, or love and light all of the time. But life is a life of duality, and it's darkness too. And if we're going to look at this in a bit of a Jungian perspective, which I think is a pretty good perspective to look at things through, we look at integration of the shadow. We don't try and repress anything. We work through it and we work with it, but we have to see it in order to do that. And that means dragging your demons into the light, literally shining a light on them. And the light is of love and of compassion and kindness, and cradling them in some instances because they're born from fear. ultimately, it's just fear that keeps us lost and small and brittle and broken and bitter and angry at the world. That's just fear. That's just fear, but it's not real. Only love is real. Only love is real. So we have to start this journey. And the more healing that we do, the more awareness that we bring, the more light that we absorb, the more light that we're able to give out, like a little lighthouse, And it's fine to go through the dark, and going through the dark is part of the journey. And then when you found your light again, something else will come along, like a Monty Python foot from the sky, and it might squash you a bit again temporarily. And again, you fight to find that light. And again, you work with spirit to find that light. And that's where practices again like meditation are golden. Because meditation helps you keep your foot in the door, so to speak. Aldous Huxley called it the doors of perception, And the band The Doors based their name upon that too. And the doors of perception is like the egoic mind that keeps the doors closed. It's the right hemisphere of your brain, which houses the creative, the link to the numinous, all of that. And it's so vital that we find that. It's vital for our souls, because that's how we drink deeply to nourish and cherish ourselves again, so that we can go back out into the world in an effective way. If we keep the doors closed, if we don't even look, if we go, no, we don't believe in God, if we become atheists and all the rest of it, well, then you're in danger. You're in danger of falling into depression. You're in danger of falling into the dark. There's a constant war on this planet of light and dark, a dance between light and dark in some cases, but I prefer to see it more as a war. And the dark can visit you in so many different forms. Some of the forms are the little voice within you that tells you you're not good enough in the dead of night. Well, that's an onslaught of the dark, because you are good enough and you are worthy. So you have to banish that voice. You have to banish it with great love. Say, you're not welcome. That isn't true. Hold on to that love within you, for that love that is for you as well as anybody else. You are no less worthy or no more worthy than anyone else on this planet, but you are worthy. You are worthy and you matter, and your being here is important. But all of us need replenishing from time to time, and spiritual nourishment forms a part of that. So too does creativity. AI can't create, not in the same way humans can. We've got the power of creativity within us. And that again is a touch of the numinous, because you're dancing with something whether you're writing or you're singing, whatever it is that you're doing, or painting. You're letting in the muse, and the muse is sometimes a touch, sometimes more than a touch, of something beyond, something you can't really name, that moves you, that moves through you, that works with you to create something really beautiful. It's almost like your egoic mind steps out of the way and something comes rushing in and creates with you and through you, And I believe the twin flame journey is another manifestation of this. It's a way of waking us up. It's just checking in with you in a big way. Who are you? Are you happy where you are? The more in darkness you find yourself in the twin flame journey, the more work you've got to do for self-acceptance, for moving through difficulties, for answering the call of who you are. Not necessarily accepting all of your flaws if you think that they've been a repeated pattern that have landed you consistently in trouble, but an acceptance of where you've been in the past and a willingness to change in the future if you want to see external change. If you don't, if you're happy, then that's fine. But if you recognise patterns of behaviour have led you into, say, a prison of your own mind, a very sterile environment that's safe as houses, but hasn't lit you up for a long time, and then here's a journey that's starting to light you up. And the end goal might not be this person that's lit you up, but the feeling that they give you just gives you a tantalizing feeling of what's missing, perhaps. You might not be able to find that same equivalent feeling. It had to be strong to jolt you out of your slumber. But you might find something else that's beautiful. And what might you do to take a step towards finding that within yourself? You know? Do you sing? Do you dance? Do you paint? Do you write? When was the last time you did something creative? Just for the joy of it. Nowadays as well, creativity can be so intertwined with making money. You know? It can be absolutely ruinous to the soul in some cases. You know, the test audience for a film or God knows what. It's all of these things can stamp on creativity. Creativity just wants to do what it wants to do. It wants to go where it wants to go and be expressed in the way it needs to be expressed. It doesn't want to be boxed in and assigned a financial value, you know? It's about moving the heart, not your bank balance. And this journey of life, it's memories that sustain us in the dark. Memories of your loved ones, memories of the things that you did, memories of the things that have moved you. These are the things that sustain you. If you've had a lot of love in your life, you've got a lot of beautiful memories. And if you've got a life that's been a bit dull and a bit sterile and a bit dead at times, then there might not be so many memories. And you have to find what it is that moves you, and we're all different. So for some people, it might be that the best life they can create is literally finding a little narrow boat and going and living on it in the middle of a canal somewhere, you know? It might be mountain climbing to somebody else. It might be learning to paint at 70 for someone else. It could be writing that novel you've always meant to write. There's never an age limit at which you stop. There never is. That's just a story we tell ourselves. We might tell ourselves, oh, that's a young person's thing. You know, life can get more rigid as we get older. But I don't think it's necessarily meant to. We just allow it to do that. We get a bit stuck in our ways. And we forget that actually all we need to do sometimes is make a tiny little change here and there to invite something different into our lives, you know. I was reminded of this a little while ago because I take the same routes to work every day, you know, and they're safe, ordered, normal routes, and you get used to that. And your heart, your mind gets used to that. You sit in the car, you're almost on autopilot. And a little while ago, one of the roads was closed. And a new route popped up and it just cut across the forest. And it's a forest that I drive through quite often. But this bit of forest I hadn't driven through before. So I went through the forest and it was otherworldly. It was just very beautiful. There were these mossy, gnarled trees, sort of gnarled and hanging overhead. And it was quite dark and the road was very narrow. And suddenly from this sunny day, I was plunged into this mossy woodland that looked ancient and inviting and uncanny. And the road was very narrow, and I was aware that if I came off the road, I would need to be towed away because it was so boggy and marshy on either side of this narrow little road. And I just hoped that I wouldn't meet anyone coming the other way. And I did meet a couple of cars. Luckily, they backed up to a couple of points. So I was able to pass okay. Otherwise, it could have been a different story. And there was one little baby house along this road. And it was so dark and so mossy and so enchanting. And I was just amazed that I'd driven past this for years and had no idea it existed. And then I went through this winding little road, this enchanting winding little road, feeling like I'd stepped into another past century. And then eventually the road got a bit wider and then came out onto this A road, this well-known A road. And suddenly I was plunged back into the familiar again. And it was this dance from being in the very familiar mechanical world into the uncanny, into the unknown, into this forest, and then plunged back out, back into the known, back into this world of everything being known, safe and ordered. And it just gave me this feeling of enchantment just for a second. The uncanny just for a second reminded me that this world that we think we know is kind of a facade. Truly, there's another world behind it of mysticism and magic. And we've forgotten it. As a species, we've become very, very good at being in logical, rational ways. Well, I say good at that. We're good at being in the left hemisphere of our brain. But what we think of as being rational and ordered, very often we are not quite as rational and ordered as we think. But unfortunately, ever since the dawn of the Enlightenment, which sort of severed the rational from the mystical and elevated the rational, gave it a point of primacy, made it elevated above everything else, ever since that day, we have relegated the mystical, the realm of the numinous, to nothing more than a flight of fancy. But it isn't just a flight of fancy. It's kind of soul food, and it's necessary to the human soul. It's as necessary as breathing. The human soul forms part of that. And here we are now. We're at the dawn of a time where we're about to follow AI. We're about to potentially become a bit enslaved to AI and to machines. And that's not a good thing. But there's another path, and that's a path back to yourself, a path back to the mystical that is within you. And I think as time goes on, it might be harder to take that path, especially if people are sort of hooked up to machines via Neuralink and things like this. But the path exists, and at the moment the path is just there. And there are more and more videos about this path all of the time. We're hearing about people's near-death experiences. We're hearing about meditation. We're hearing about strange, uncanny experiences that just hit people out of nowhere. And if you're on a twin flame journey, that's one such mystical experience. Come to just shake you awake out of your complacency with the world, So it's a journey of self-discovery, of being a little bit humble, being a bit self-aware, allowing your ego facade to just crack aside for a second, to just open up and take a little look at what you're doing. Who are you? Where are you? How are you showing up in the world? Are you happy with that? And if you're not happy with that, what steps can you take to come back to feeling happy about yourself, proud of yourself as a human? Because you've got that power to make that change at any point in your life. You don't have to simply follow the same pattern of behaviour. Change can happen in an instant, sometimes radical change if you allow it. And again, this journey is inviting such change. It's a real catalysing element. This great love for this other forces change, or it forces a real tower moment in some cases. The tower being the tarot cards, which is the tower is the construct of your own ego, literally crumbling, and many things can cause a tower moment. But sometimes it's only in the destruction that there can be a reconstruction of self. You know, when you think about the journey from caterpillar to butterfly, the caterpillar couldn't get there if it denied the journey, if it shied away from the journey. You know, if someone said to the caterpillar, you've got to turn into a puddle of goo, essentially completely break down, you'll be held in an outer chrysalis. But then eventually you have to break that chrysalis as well. And then you're going to emerge with wings. You're going to be a bit vulnerable for a while, but then you're going to start flapping those wings and you can fly. But you're not going to look how you used to look. You're going to be transformed, but for the better. And the chances are, if you said that to the caterpillar, it would have such a well-functioning ego, probably, that it would say, I'm not doing that, man. That sounds horrific. That's death. And then rebirth. That's literal death. And I want to protect my caterpillar self, so I won't allow that death to happen. But if it didn't, it would never get there. And I think sometimes life can be that cataclysmic as well. Sometimes we've changed so very much that nothing less than destruction of our egoic sense of who we think we are is required in order that we dig deep and find that we had wings all along and we just didn't know. And they've been growing and growing and growing, and we just didn't know, till suddenly there they are. And we've emerged anew through the horrors and the darkness of it all, emerged out into the light. And sometimes it's the greatest of the dark night of the soul. It's the greatest the greatest nights where you're crying out in the darkness and you're asking the universe for help. And when you come out the other side of that, because you will, you realise that you've changed and grown in ways that you just couldn't have comprehended. There's always a gift in the dark night of the soul. Sometimes it can take many years to see the gift. Sometimes it can take not so long at all, but there will be a gift, and the gift will be you'll have levelled up in some way. If you can come through it with love, you know, if you come through a dark night of the soul and you hold on to hate or bitterness or regret, then you're not learning the lessons. Because ultimately these are states to move through with great love and compassion, but not places to hang on to construct a new identity within. That cannot hold. You know, that's a dangerous place to reside. These places will not sustain you. They'll just drag you deeper into darkness if you let them. So you must combat them. Work with them. Work with your fears. Work with the darkness. Work with it with great love. Just bring yourself back to love where you can. And if you're struggling and if you think, yeah, but you don't know my life, it's been so hard, and just try to find one tiny thing that you're grateful for and start there, because one tiny seed of gratitude can really start to reignite something within, I believe anyway, potentially. And if you can't do that right now, well then just have compassion for yourself and allow yourself to not be able to do that in this minute, but allow for life to work through you and move through you. And trust that nothing stays the same forever. That this darkness that you're enshrouded in, you will come through. You will come through eventually. So yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey of trust, because you have to learn to trust in yourself. You have to learn to trust in the universe, in the divine, that you're going through this for a reason. And even if it's dark, even if you're in that yearning phase for your loved one, and maybe you've just collapsed because they were your last hope, this too shall pass. And there's a lesson there for you. It's happening for a reason. And it's not because the universe wants to torture you. It's because it wants to teach you you had the wings all along, that the love you seek without is really within. And when you get that, when you start to really, truly get that, that's when the transformation really starts to happen. And you may or may not end up with your divine counterparts. But maybe that wasn't the point to end up with them. And maybe it was, and maybe you will, but you'll have that sense of love for yourself, of nourishment within yourself, knowing how to nourish yourself and cherish yourself without needing it from this other person in the same way, you know? We're all of us interdependent beings. We all of us need other people to a degree, but not being reliant upon them, not needing them in that way. Because with the anxious and avoidant attachment especially, the more the avoidant dances away into the night, the more anxious the anxious person can become, needing more from the avoidant, and the avoidant, sensing that need, will move away further. You know, so at worst they can really trigger each other in a very wounding way, trigger those inner child core wounds. So when the anxious person learns to sustain themselves, and yes, still perhaps need their partner from time to time, but not in the same way of needing them to validate themselves and vice versa, of knowing who they are, knowing their core worth, knowing they're a divine spark of God, knowing that, cherishing that, nurturing that. And when they're both in that place, it's a healthier way to come together. And this journey then is a sort of multifaceted school of learning in a way. And maybe it never stops, I don't know. But it's certainly got a lot to teach us alongside everything else in life, you know. So many things are teaching us lessons in life, and this is just another one of them. But it doesn't have to all be pain and darkness and difficulty either. You know, I like to think that if you come through these lessons, if you learn to look at your inner child wounding a little bit, have a bit of therapy, or maybe a shamanic healing or some sort of alternative healing, start to tend to those wounds that perhaps were untended or unknown for a time. And when you start to heal yourself a bit in this way, and if they do too, then potentially the dance between you can get a bit less painful and a bit more fun, you know, as you can rediscover the light between the two of you again. So there's that as well. So it's like a depth charge in a way, you know, if you're on a twin flame journey. And it can feel like the most unromantic of journeys at times, because it asks so very much of you, you know. But ultimately, I think it's a gift. I like to think of it as a gift. It's a gift to discover what true love can feel like. It's a gift to discover what your other half can truly feel like. What it feels like to touch their soul, you know, what it feels like for your soul and their soul to be entwined. And it's a gift to learn about yourself on a whole deeper level as well. So rather than seeking reunion at all costs, even if you're finding compatibility an issue in the 3D, maybe it should be switched instead to finding out who you are, diving deeper within yourself, going to the difficult places with great love and compassion, balancing the yin and the yang within, dancing with the divine a little bit and allowing that door to be open a little bit to God, to the divinity that is within you. And allowing yourself to dance with life a bit, come back to joy, come back to love, come out of cynicism, come back to your heart and come back to trust and trusting in God, you know. Synchronicities as well can abound in this connection, and they're kind of like God showing off at times when you realise that you're not just a little speck of animated matter prancing about in the universe, that you matter, that your being here is no accident, you know, that the universe isn't this cold, dead place and you just happen to be a random, happy little evolution experiment, but that you actually matter and you were divinely created to be right here, right now, right time, right place, to give back something of yourself to the world. And if you're not sure what that is, well, what are you good at? What makes your soul sing? What sets your heart on fire? These are the things that will tell you what your gift is to give back to the world. And the more you give, the more you will be rewarded in return with the whole just enriching nature of the creative process and knowing that you've touched other people's lives. And it is a difficult world, and it is a crazy world at the moment. There's so much chaos out there, and we forget to take a pause. We forget to come back to ourselves and nourish ourselves. And just switching our phones off, switching off our TVs, and picking up a book is one very simple way to do that. Because we're so often wired at the moment. We're wired for dopamine hits, the rewards from social media, pings, to have such scattered energy that we're constantly reading, reviewing, watching videos, many videos on many different subjects. And we're not often just coming back to peace, coming back to the love that is within us. Just walking outside our front door with nowhere to go, no agenda, no plan, just ambling along to just listen to birdsong and watch nature for a time. But I like to think that we're undergoing an spiritual awakening en masse at the moment. It looks like we are. I feel like these times that we're in, everything that is inauthentic is crumbling. Whether it's financial systems, government systems, companies, coming back to our hearts is key. Coming back to the love that you are. Coming back to the spirituality that's within you. All of this is key. And that will sustain you, and that will help you move forward as well. And we have the answers we need, and we're given the answers we need. We don't have to stay rooted in fear. The media would have you be very fearful of the world. The governments would have you be the same. But if you come back to love and joy, and you hear the whispers of the universe, and you start to see signs and synchronicities at play within your own life, you start to realise there's a guidance system with you always. Sometimes it's a little bit hidden. Sometimes it's just hidden within the noise of the everyday, of media stories and God knows what else, but it's always there. You just have to be paying attention is all. And when you're in a frequency of love and kindness and gratitude, that's when you're more likely to pay attention. That's when your antenna is up and receiving from the universe. When you're awake and aware and alive to all the beauty of the world. So if you're on the journey, take heart, you're not alone. There's a lot of videos out there if you want to look on YouTube and look for videos about the twin flame journey. And if you've been on the journey a long time and you're starting to feel jaded or impatient, just know that there's a reason for it. And there are soul lessons to learn here. There are soul lessons to learn. And it could help you to look at astrology as well, to see where you are, to see what lessons you might be meant to learn in this lifetime. And one good way of looking at that as well is look at where your south node, what sign your south node and your north node are in, because these are going to tell you a lot about what you need to shed and let go of, and a lot about what you need to move towards, There's so many ways for us to know ourselves. And there's always more to learn. But ultimately, even in the difficulty and the darkness of this life, there is beauty and there is love at the heart of everything. And I absolutely believe that 100% with my whole heart, And I hope that in these times, even these chaotic times, that we come back to that inner knowing, that we come back to that sense that we are loved and held by a loving God or the divine. Even in our pain, the love that's out there doesn't necessarily mean pain will be removed, because it's part of our journey. of discovering more about who we are, discovering more about the world around us. But it does mean that we're held, and there are angels, there are spirit guides walking beside you every step of the way. You're never alone. You're never alone, and you are so very loved beyond measure by your loved ones on the other side, and by your spirit guides, etc., and by a very loving God that is not an angry God of the Bible or other books either. Just so much love out there. And there will be a reunion, maybe in another life. It might not be in this one. But your soul will probably meet up with this soul again. If you're twin flames, you know, there will be more meetings between you, etc. And maybe a final coming together. And the pain that you feel, if you're feeling pain at this moment about the journey, you will come through that, and it will get easier, and you will feel more lovingly held and guided by the divine. You know, it's a strange, magical journey. It's a journey to take by moonlight. The normal rational rules of life don't really apply. But ultimately it's a journey of love, and a journey back to love, journey back to the love within your own heart. And what could be more beautiful than that? So wherever you are tonight, whatever you're doing, I just wish you love. I wish you well. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've had a good Christmas. And I hope you're starting to know that the love that you are is the main part of who you are, that is you, that all of the facade of who you are, the personas that you wear, the different hats that you wear, they're part of you too, but the core part of you, the core of who you are, is love. And if you can hold yourself with that feeling of tenderness and care as you would love a great friend of yours, well then that's a good step on any journey. It's a good place to start. So take care, and just wishing you well, just sending you all best wishes and a lot of love with this message. Take care and God bless.